Hello, my name is Jasper. I'm 24 and I live in Cedar Hollow, a small mountain town in Colorado where the old coal mines still cast long shadows over everything. The kind of place where the air smells like pine and damp earth and the winters bite hard enough to make you forget what warmth feels like. I've been working in the mines since I was 19, starting right out of high school, because college wasn't for me and the pay was steady. I check electrical systems mostly on night shifts when the tunnels are quiet except for the drip of water and the occasional groan of settling rock. I rent a small cabin on the edge of town, nothing fancy. Just a wood stove, a bed, and a kitchen table that wobbles if you lean on it too hard. My truck is a '98 Ford that's more rust than paint, but it gets me to the mine and back. Life's simple: wake up in the afternoon, grab coffee from the diner, head to the shaft for my shift, and try not to think too much about the darkness below. I've always been the quiet type, the one who keeps to himself. No girlfriend, no big plans. Just the job, the mountains, and the routine that keeps everything from falling apart. That night was like any other, or so I thought. It was pouring rain, the kind that turns the dirt roads into mud and makes the mine entrance slick as ice. I was on the night shift again, descending into the auxiliary shaft around midnight. The elevator cage rattled as it dropped me 400 feet down the air, growing cooler and heavier with every second. My headlamp cut through the black, illuminating wet walls, glistening like they'd been crying for years. I had my toolkit slung over my shoulder, checking the backup power lines, routine maintenance to make sure nothing shorted out and left us in total dark. The tunnels echoed with my footsteps, boots splashing in shallow puddles. I fixed a loose junction box, tested the voltage, and noted it in my log. Nothing out of the ordinary. The mine has a way of making you feel small, like the weight of the mountain is pressing down, just waiting for an excuse to crush you. But I've gotten used to it. It's home in a weird way. By the time I was ready to head back up, it was pushing 3 a.m. The rain hadn't let up. I could hear it thundering on the surface, even from down here. As the cage rattled me toward the entrance, I stepped out into the dim light of the surface shack. That's when I saw her. She was standing near the makeshift medical station by the mine mouth, a small trailer with a red cross painted on the side. Wearing a white doctor's coat over jeans and boots, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail that had come partially undone from the humidity. She looked out of place, like someone who'd wandered off a city street and ended up here by mistake. Tall, with sharp features softened by exhaustion, her face caught the glow from my headlamp. Mid-40s maybe, but with the kind of presence that made the damp air feel less oppressive. She turned as I approached, wiping rain from her sleeve. "You're the last one down there tonight, right?" Her voice was steady, professional, but there was a slight tremor, like she was forcing it. I nodded, switching off my lamp. "Yeah, just finishing up the auxiliary power check. Everything's solid." She glanced back toward the shaft, opening, the rain pounding on the metal roof above us. Then quieter. "I always thought I was tough, until I had to stand alone down there, 400 feet under, with nothing but silence." I stopped, surprised. Most folks from the city, doctors, inspectors, they act like the mine's just another job site. But she looked genuinely unsettled, her arms crossed tight like she was holding herself together. "Dr. Harper, right. I'd heard about her, the new resident doctor on some health project for miners shipped in from Denver or Boulder. Elise Harper." She met my eyes, a faint smile breaking through the fatigue. "Elise is fine. And you are?" "Jasper." I wiped my hands on my pants, suddenly aware of the coal dust on them. "It's not so bad once you get used to it. The quiet down there, it's better than the noise up here sometimes." She let out a soft laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe, but tonight it felt endless." She paused, then added, "I came down earlier for a routine check on the emergency kits. Thought I'd wait for the last shift to clear. Didn't expect the dark to hit that hard." I didn't know what to say at first. People don't usually admit fear like that, especially not to a guy like me, just a miner with calloused hands and no fancy degree. But something in her voice made me respond. "The dark's not the worst part. It's when the rocks shift and you hear that crack. That's when you pay attention." She nodded slowly, looking at me like she was seeing something new. "You make it sound almost peaceful." "Only if you respect it." I shrugged, feeling awkward under her gaze. We stood there for a minute, the rain easing up outside. She asked a few questions about the shifts, the crew, the common injuries. I answered honestly, no sugarcoating the aches, the dust in your lungs, the close calls. As I turned to leave, she called out softly, "Be careful down there, Jasper." I glanced back, nodding. "Always am." Walking to my truck, the rain soaking through my jacket, I couldn't shake her image the way her face looked under the lamp, cold, but tired, strong, but admitting weakness. I'd seen plenty of people come and go in this town, but none like her. A city doctor scared of the silence more than the depths. For the first time in a long while, the night didn't feel so empty. After that night, I couldn't get Elise out of my head. It wasn't some dramatic obsession, just this quiet pull, like the mind's gravity had shifted a little. I'd find myself checking the clock during shifts, wondering if she'd show up at the medical trailer again. And more often than not, she did. She started coming around during my night shifts, saying it was part of her occupational health monitoring for the crew. Routine stuff, she'd claim checking blood pressure logs or updating injury reports. But I'd catch her lingering outside the shaft entrance, sitting on that old wooden bench under the floodlights, waiting for me to surface. The other guys noticed, too, teasing me about the fancy doctor from the city hanging around. I brushed it off, but deep down it made the long nights feel shorter. The first few times we'd just talk shop. She'd ask about the conditions down below, the humidity, the dust levels, how often the ventilation fans acted up. I'd tell her straight how the air gets thick enough to chew, how a small rockfall can turn a shift into chaos, or the time the main pump failed and we had to wade through knee-deep water to fix it. She listened like it mattered, not like some outsider collecting data for a report. And she'd share bits about her work stories from the ER back in Denver, the high-pressure surgeries, the patients who walked out fine, and the ones who didn't. One night, about 2 weeks after we met, things got real. I was down in the lower level, rerouting a frayed cable near the coalface. The air was thick with dust, and my gloves were slick with sweat. I reached for a junction box, and a sharp piece of metal sheared off from the conveyor belt, slicing clean across my forearm. It burned like fire blood, soaking my sleeve before I even registered the pain. I cursed under my breath, wrapped it with a rag from my pocket, and finished the job. No big deal, cuts happen. You patch up and keep moving. When I got topside, Elise was there, like she'd been waiting. Her eyes widened when she saw the blood seeping through. "Jasper, what the hell happened?" "Just a scratch," I muttered, trying to play it off as I headed for my truck. She grabbed my good arm. "Like hell it is. Come on, medical trailer now." I followed her inside the small space lit by a single fluorescent bulb humming overhead. She made me sit on the exam table while she pulled out gloves and supplies. Her hands were steady at first, cleaning the gash with antiseptic that stung worse than the cut itself. But when she started stitching it up, neat, precise pulls with the needle, I noticed her fingers trembling slightly as they brushed my skin. "You don't have to do this," I said quietly. "I can head to the clinic in town tomorrow." She didn't look up. I've seen worse in the OR: gunshots, car wrecks, hearts stopping on the table. But watching someone just bleed and act like it's nothing that's new. I winced as she tied off a stitch. "Down here, you don't have time to hurt for long. Stop too long. And the mountain reminds you who's boss." She paused, her eyes meeting mine for the first time since we started. "Is that what happened to your brother?" The question hit like a rockfall. I hadn't told anyone here the details in years, but something in her voice, tired knowing, made me answer. "Yeah, 2 years ago. Main shaft collapse during a blast. I was working the level below. Heard the rumble, felt the ground shake. By the time we dug through, he was gone, buried under tons of coal and stone. I held his hand until the end, but it wasn't enough." The trailer went silent except for the rain pattering on the roof. Elise's hand stilled on my arm. She finished the last stitch, then pressed a bandage over it gently, her touch lingering. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I know what that's like. Not the mind, but losing someone you couldn't save." She sat back, pulling off her gloves. "My husband, ex-husband, now he died on my table. Heart attack during what should have been a routine procedure. I was the lead surgeon. I did everything right, but he coded and we couldn't bring him back." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she looked away toward the small window where the mine lights flickered in the dark. I saw it then, the weight she carried hidden behind that professional mask. The city doctor with the steady hands wasn't unbreakable after all. I reached out with my good arm, touching her hand lightly. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Elise." She didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her palm up, letting our fingers intertwine for a moment. "Neither do you." We sat like that for a while, no words needed. The pain in my arm faded to a dull throb, but something else ached deeper, the shared kind of hurt that doesn't heal quick. From then on, our nights changed. She'd wait for me and we'd talk longer. About the little things, the way rain sounded different underground, how the stars looked brighter up here away from city lights, or the stupid jokes the crew told to get through the shifts. She'd bring coffee sometimes, black and strong, and we'd share it on the bench. I'd tell her about growing up in Cedar Hollow, fishing in the creeks, as a kid losing my dad young to black lung. She'd open up more about the divorce papers she'd signed alone in a high-rise apartment, the nights she'd questioned why she even became a doctor. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was understanding. Two people scarred in ways no one else saw, finding solace in the quiet hours when the world above slept. I started looking forward to those nights, not dreading the descent into the dark. Because now there was someone waiting when I came up, someone who got it. And for the first time since my brother died, the mind didn't feel like a grave. It felt like a place where something new was starting to breathe. A few weeks passed like that, with Elise and me falling into a rhythm that felt almost natural. The nights blurred together, me emerging from the shaft covered in dust, her waiting with a thermos of coffee, or just her presence on that bench. We'd talk until the sky started to lighten, sharing stories that got deeper each time. She told me about the pressure of being a surgeon, the lives she'd saved, and the ones that haunted her dreams. I'd open up about the mind's hold on me, how it took my brother and my dad before him, but also how it was the only life I knew. It wasn't flirting. It was something quieter, more real, like we were patching each other's invisible wounds without needing to name them. Then, one evening, as I was clocking out, Elise approached me at the trailer with a flyer in hand. It was for a community meeting at the town hall where the volunteer medical team was presenting on mind safety and health risks. "I'm giving a talk," she said, her voice professional, but with that slight hesitation I'd come to recognize. "About respiratory issues, injury prevention, the usual. You should come. It'd be good for the crew to hear it from someone who gets it." I glanced at the flyer, feeling out of place just holding it. Me? At a meeting with doctors in suits, I'd stick out like a sore thumb. She smiled faintly. "That's why you should be there. To show them what it's really like down there." I shook my head. "Not my scene, Elise. Crowd speeches? I'd rather stay in the dark." She didn't push, just nodded and tucked the flyer away. "Fair enough. But if you change your mind—" I didn't plan to. The idea of standing in a room full of people in clean clothes talking about things I lived every day made my skin crawl. I spent the next few days buried in work, telling myself it was for the best. But as the night of the meeting approached, I couldn't shake it. Her voice echoed in my head, the way she'd said it, like she actually wanted me there. Not for the talk, but for her. The evening came cold and clear, with stars punching through the mountain sky. I finished my shift early, went home, and stared at my closet. Nothing but flannels and work shirts stained with grease. I picked the least dirty one, a faded blue button-up, and drove to the town hall anyway. Parked out back, slipped in through the side door, and stood at the rear of the room, arms crossed, feeling like an idiot. The place was half full miners. I knew some town folks, a handful of doctors in collared shirts. Elise was up front, poised behind a podium with slides projecting charts on dust exposure and lung disease. She looked different in the light, confident, commanding her voice, carrying without effort as she explained the risks we'd all ignored for years. She talked about black lung cases, she'd seen the long-term damage from poor ventilation, and pushed for better monitoring. The room listened. Even the old-timers nodded along. When she finished, there was applause, polite but genuine. She stepped down, shaking hands, answering questions. I stayed in the shadows, debating whether to slip out. But then her eyes scanned the room and landed on me. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by something softer. She excused herself from the group and walked over. "You came," she said quietly, stopping a few feet away. I shrugged, hands in my pockets. "Yeah." Didn't want to miss it. She studied me, taking in the oil stains on my cuffs, the way I shifted uncomfortably. "Liar. You hate this stuff." I met her gaze. "I came for you, Elise, not the speech." The words hung there heavier than I intended. Her expression changed, eyes widening slightly, lips parting like she was searching for a response. The room noise faded around us. "Jasper?" I didn't back down. "You know it's true." She glanced around, then nodded toward the door. "Walk with me." We left the hall together, the cool night air hitting us as we headed down the empty street toward the mine road. Neither spoke at first, our footsteps crunching on gravel. The moon was high, casting silver light over the hills. I stopped near the old fence overlooking the shaft entrance. "You make the dark feel less heavy," I said, finally turning to her. "Ever since that first night, you've got me seeing light where there wasn't any before, not just from a headlamp." She stopped walking, facing me. The moonlight caught the lines around her eyes, the way her breath fogged slightly in the chill. "Jasper, you don't understand. I'm 44. I've been married, divorced. I've pushed people away before they could leave me. I've been rejected and I've done the rejecting. It's not simple." I stepped closer. "Nothing about life down there is simple. Or up here. But what I feel, that's straightforward. I see you, Elise. The real you, the one who's scared of the quiet, who carries losses like I do. And I want more of it. More of you." Her eyes glistened, but she turned away, arms wrapped around herself. "You deserve someone without all this baggage. Someone your age who hasn't failed at love already." "I don't want someone else." My voice was steady. "I want the woman who waits for me in the rain, who stitches me up and listens like no one else does. If that's too much, say it now. Reject me tonight. But don't just go quiet." She faced me again, conflict written all over her. For a moment I thought she'd step forward, say yes, or at least something. But she shook her head, voice barely above a whisper. "I can't. Not yet." Then she walked away, back toward the town lights, leaving me standing there alone. That night she didn't show up at the medical trailer. No bench, no coffee, no quiet conversation waiting for me after my shift. The mind felt colder, the dark heavier again. I sat outside for hours staring at the shaft, wondering if I'd pushed too far. If confessing had broken whatever fragile thing we'd built. Part of me regretted it, the words that chased her off. But another part knew it was right. Loving someone means risking the silence. And for Elise, silence was the scariest thing of all. I just hoped she'd find her way back through it. The next shifts dragged. I threw myself into work, checking lines that didn't need checking, staying underground longer than necessary. But every time the cage brought me up, I'd scan for her anyway. Nothing. I told myself to let it go. She was right, we were from different worlds. Her with the city scars and surgeon's precision, me with coal dust in my veins, but the ache didn't fade. It settled deep like a warning rumble in the rock. Little did I know the mountain was about to force the issue in a way neither of us expected. A week dragged by without her. No Elise on the bench, no thermos of coffee waiting after my shift, no quiet conversations cutting through the night's chill. The mind felt emptier than ever, like the darkness had won back the small bit of light she'd brought. I'd surface each time scanning the trailer lights out of habit, then drive home and silence the radio off because even music felt wrong. I told myself it was for the best. She was right to pull away. I was just a miner with rough hands and a life tied to the earth. She deserved more than someone who flirted with death every shift. But letting go wasn't easy. Her words from that moonlit walk echoed the divorce, the fear of being left again. I got it, I'd lost enough to know walls go up for a reason. Still, the ache lingered, a constant throb like an old injury flaring in bad weather. Then, everything changed in an instant. It was a Thursday night or early Friday morning around 2 a.m. The crew was running lean, just a handful of us in the auxiliary shaft, wrapping up maintenance before the weekend. I was in the lower drift checking the methane detectors near the old coal face. The air was thick, heavier than usual, with that faint, rotten egg smell that sets your nerves on edge. I radioed up to the surface. "Levels are spiking a bit here. Might need to vent more." The response crackled back. "Copy that, Jasper. Hold tight, we're adjusting fans." I should have climbed out then, but one of the pumps was acting up, water pooling where it shouldn't. I stayed to reroute it, muscle memory taking over. That's when it happened. A low rumble at first, like thunder rolling underground. Then a sharp crack followed by the roar. Gas explosion, methane igniting somewhere deeper in the pocket. The shockwave hit like a freight train, slamming me against the wall. Dust choked the air rocks raining down as the ceiling gave way. I scrambled for cover under a support beam, headlamp flickering, as the world collapsed around me. Pain exploded in my ribs, something heavy had clipped me. The lights went out, emergency backups failing in the blast. Total black. I coughed, tasting blood and coal dust, my radio sparking but dead. Buried alive or close to it. The weight pressed in, the silence deafening, except for my ragged breathing and the occasional shift of settling stone. Up top, chaos erupted. Alarms blared across the site, floodlights snapping on as the night crew scrambled. Word spread fast explosion in the auxiliary partial collapse. One man unaccounted for me. The rescue team mobilized, but early reports were grim. The epicenter was unstable gas levels, still high risk of secondary collapse. Low chance of survivors down there. I heard later, one of them said over the radio. Elise was at her apartment in town when the call came. One of the foremen knew she was the on-site doctor. He rang her for emergency standby. She threw on clothes and sped to the mine tires, screeching on wet pavement. By the time she arrived, the scene was lit up like daylight trucks generators, humming men in hard hats, shouting coordinates. She pushed through the crowd, badge in hand, demanding updates. The incident commander filled her in. Jasper was in the drift when it blew. We're prepping to go in, but it's hot residual gas, unstable roof. Might be hours before we reach him if he's even... He didn't finish, but Elise heard it. Her face went pale, hands clenching at her sides. She spotted a group of rescuers suiting up and overheard their hushed talk. Kid was right near the pocket. Probably didn't stand a chance. Something snapped in her. The composed doctor vanished. She shoved past the barrier tape, ignoring yells to stop. "I'm going in," she shouted at the commander. "I know the layout, I've been down there with him. There's a service tunnel on the east side, less damaged." They tried to hold her back, too dangerous protocol, but she was relentless, eyes wild with a fear I'd never seen. "He's alive, I know he is. Let me lead, or I'll go alone." Finally, they relented, gearing her up with a respirator and lamp. She descended with the first team, heart pounding as the cage dropped into the haze. Dust still hung thick, visibility near zero. She navigated by memory those nights she'd walked parts with me, listening to my explanations of the vanes and supports. "Left here, watch the fall," she'd call, voice muffled but steady. Rocks blocked paths. They dug through inches at a time. Hours, blurred sweat mixing with tears she didn't bother wiping. Her mind raced images of me trapped alone in the dark she feared so much. Regret flooded her, the walk away, the silence. If I died down here, it'd be because she was too scared to hold on. Then a breakthrough. They breached a pocket lamps, cutting through the gloom. There I was, slumped against the wall, face smeared with blood, chest heaving shallowly under rubble. Alive. "Jasper!" She dropped to her knees, checking vitals while the team secured the area. My eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then locking on her. "Elise, you came back." Tears streamed down her face as she cradled my head, stabilizing my neck. "I never left. I was just terrified of losing you like this, of loving someone who dances with death every day." I managed a weak smile through the pain. "Worth the risk, for you." The team lifted me onto a stretcher, hauling me out as secondary rumbles warned of more instability. On the surface, paramedics swarmed, loading me into the ambulance. Elise rode with me, holding my hand the whole way, refusing to let go even as they hooked up IVs and monitors. In the chaos, she leaned close, whispering, "I'm not running anymore. Whatever this is, us. I'm in." The doors slammed shut, sirens wailing as we raced to the hospital. For the first time, the dark didn't win. She'd pulled me out of it literally. And in doing so, she'd faced her own shadows. Recovery was rough, cracked ribs, concussion cuts everywhere, but I made it. Elise was there every day, sleeping in the chair beside my bed, bringing real food from town. We didn't talk big declarations yet. Just held on, knowing the mountain had forced what words couldn't. She'd saved my life. And in return, I'd given her a reason to stay. 6 months have passed since that night the mountain tried to claim me. The scars on my ribs still pull when the weather turns cold, but they're nothing compared to the ones inside that have finally started to fade. I took the promotion to safety supervisor no more, descending into the depths every shift. Now I spend my days topside training new guys on protocols, inspecting gear, making sure no one else gets buried like my brother did. It's not the same adrenaline, but it feels right, like I'm giving back or at least trying to balance the scales. Elise never left Cedar Hollow. After the accident, she extended her contract indefinitely, turning the temporary medical trailer into a permanent clinic for the miners and the town. She renovated an old building near the mine entrance, white walls, proper exam rooms, even a small waiting area with chairs that don't creak. Folks come in for everything, checkups, aches from years of labor, kids with scraped knees. She's become part of the place, the doctor who understands the dust in our lungs better than anyone. We didn't rush anything after the hospital. No big talks about the future, no labels slapped on what we had. She helped with my recovery, changing bandages, forcing me to rest when I'd rather be working. I'd bring her dinner on late nights, sitting in her apartment above the clinic, sharing meals in comfortable silence. Some evenings we'd walk the old mining roads, her hand in mine, talking about nothing and everything. The age difference, her past divorce, my losses, they didn't vanish. But they stopped mattering as much. We just fit. The town noticed, of course. Whispers at the diner, sideways glances from the crew, but no one said much. In a place like this, people mind their business if you're not hurting anyone. And we weren't. We were healing. One rainy afternoon, the kind where the clouds hang low over the peaks and the air smells like wet pine, I finished my shift early. I'd been working on something in secret for weeks, a hand-drawn map of the mine tunnels. Not the official blueprints, but my own version. I'd marked the spots that meant something, the bench where she first waited, the junction where I got cut and she stitched me up. The exact place in the drift where she found me after the collapse. Little notes in the margins. First coffee shared. The night you admitted you were scared. Where you saved me. I folded it carefully, slipped it into a paper bag, and headed to the clinic. The rain drummed on the roof as I pushed open the door. Elise was inside, organizing supplies on the counter, vials, bandages, her white coat hanging on the hook. She looked up surprised, turning into that soft smile I lived for. "Jasper, you're early." Got off soon as the rain hit. I set the bag down, heart pounding harder than any shift underground. "Brought you something." She wiped her hands and opened it, unfolding the map slowly. Her eyes scanned the lines, the marks, the notes. Recognition dawned, then emotion, tears welling as she traced the path with her finger. "This is everywhere we've been." "Every spot that matters," I said, stepping closer. "I've spent years clearing debris down there, making paths safe, fixing what's broken." I took a breath. "Now I want to ask, will you let me clear a little space in my life for you? For us?" She looked up, tears spilling over. No words at first, just set the map down and pulled me into her arms. We held each other there in the quiet clinic rain, pattering outside, the weight of everything we'd carried finally lifting. "I thought you'd never ask," she whispered against my shoulder. "Yes, God, yes." We didn't need rings or flowers, no grand gestures under the stars.